A heavy stone slab carved with the weathered face of Osiris blocks the entrance behind them. What was once a doorway is now a wall. Ahead, a narrow stairway descends into a darkness that has not been disturbed for centuries. The air is colder here, heavier, and suddenly the realization arrives, not as panic, but as certainty. They are trapped inside a sealed tomb. They were never meant to move again. What do we do when history is found, and that history was deliberately designed to stay closed? In 1871, during a forced evacuation near an ancient burial ground, two local brothers crossed a line they did not yet understand. Seeking shelter, they pushed aside a partially collapsed lintel and stepped down into a necropolis that had remained largely unread for millennia. At first, nothing dramatic happened. No collapse, no warning, just silence. They entered, and the tomb accepted them. Driven by curiosity and necessity, they began removing objects from within, small items at first, then more. What started as a handful of artifacts slowly turned into decades of illicit extraction. Over the following years, hundreds of objects left the site, sold through informal markets passed from hand to hand, stripped of context and meaning. The men who first opened the door could not have known that a single breach would invite a century of pillage, but they also could not have known something else, that the architecture they disturbed was never meant to allow easy return. If you're drawn to mysteries like this, subscribe. The necropolis itself, its precise local name unclear in early records and therefore noted here as indefinido, was no random burial ground. Its walls were densely covered in hieroglyphs arranged with purpose. These inscriptions center on one dominant presence: Osiris, the god of death, judgment, and eternal order. These were not decorative carvings, they were declarations. Images of Osiris seated in judgment, ritual scenes of offering, and repeated symbols of guardianship formed a clear message. These tombs were placed under divine protection, built to be sealed, built to remain closed, built so that what entered would not leave. And yet centuries of human traffic eroded that intention. As economic pressure mounted, tombs shifted from sacred dwellings to targets. For local communities, grave goods represented survival. For intermediaries and collectors, they represented profit. Tomb robbing became systematic. Contexts were destroyed. Histories were torn from their anchors. Knowledge was lost forever. But not every chamber was breached. In 2015, a systematic excavation led by Dr. Maria Alvarez Milagro Souza identified a tomb whose layout mirrored the very warnings described in ancient inscriptions. The entrance was framed by Osiris himself. A descending stair tightened as it went down. The walls grew more aggressive. Figures holding knives, demonic forms scholars describe as apotropaic, symbolic deterrents meant to repel intrusion. This was not decoration. This was architecture as warning. Inside, the air changes. Stone dust coats the floor. Sound dies quickly. The funerary hall opens like a shallow cavern, but doors within it fold inward, leading to deeper, narrower passages. Some drop more than 15 meters below the surface. Each step takes you further from the living world. These spaces were not designed for visitors. They were designed for permanence. Elite burials demanded more than physical protection. They required ritual security. Amulets, servant figurines, and, in rare cases, small gold plates shaped like tongues were placed at or within the mouth. Symbolic tools meant to allow speech in the afterlife. Offerings to Osiris's court, not magic meaning. Not. In 2021, excavations near the Valley of the Kings confirmed just how final this design could be. Several mummies were recovered bearing such gold plates. More striking still was the discovery of a chamber found fully sealed, its barrier intact, its interior untouched by modern hands. The seal had held. To encounter an intact sealed tomb is to confront rarity. Most were looted, collapsed, or deliberately destroyed. An unbroken seal preserves relationships, objects, bodies, placements that can never be reconstructed once disturbed. But a sealed tomb also presents danger. Not supernatural danger. Human danger. Inside such spaces, air can stagnate. Passages can shift. Doors can close under their own weight. A single movement can transform an entrance into a trap. They were never meant to move again. The ethical weight is immense. To open such a space without restraint risks irreversible loss, not only of material, but of meaning. Ownership, stewardship, and responsibility converge at the threshold of a door meant to last forever. The story around these tombs is deeply human. Archaeologists and local authorities work to document and preserve. Illicit markets work to extract and sell. Poverty, demand, and weak enforcement fuel the cycle. Yet preservation offers another path, one where heritage benefits communities rather than vanishing into private hands. Tomb robbing is not adventure, it is cultural violence, and restraint is not fear. It is respect. When we imagine the sealed chamber discovered in 2021, we must imagine restraint as the final act. Conservation before curiosity, documentation before disturbance, humility before history. Because when those tombs were built, decisions were made, out of belief, fear, love, and hope. The phrase "they were never meant to move again" is not about freezing the past. It is about honoring intention. Seti I and the builders of the Valley of the Kings understood this. Their tombs were statements of memory and permanence. And when one is found sealed today, it is not a prize. It is a responsibility. If you stood before a sealed tomb, knowing it was designed never to open, would you go in? Tell us in the comments. Share this with someone who cares about history. And if you want to explore more archaeological mysteries, continue with our next video on the Valley of the Kings and the legacy of Seti I.